Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. The breakup of the National Conference alliance with Congress may have been anticipated by many, but it seems to have happened with thinly disguised acrimony on both sides. So what is the future of this government? Can it survive till the next elections, or is it just a matter of time before it falls? Joining me to answer those questions is the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Omar Abdullah. Omar Abdullah, given that both Congress and the National Conference are disputing over who was the first to ask for a divorce, would you accept that as far as the outside world is concerned, this looks like an acrimonious parting?
No, absolutely not. It wasn't acrimonious at all. I had a very good conversation with Mrs. Gandhi about 2 weeks ago, and I don't think it's any secret that there were strong voices in both parties that were not interested in fighting these elections together, and this was but, I guess, a natural decision. And that's where we are at the moment.
Right.
I bear the Congress party no ill will, and as far as I'm concerned, there's no acrimony in my relations with the Congress party.
You referred to that conversation you had with Sonia Gandhi some 14 days ago when you conveyed to her that you wish to fight the state elections on your own, but you also added that you would make no public announcement of the parting of ways because you didn't want to look opportunistic. So were you upset when the Congress did precisely that? They called a public conference to tell the world that they were parting with you.
Well, I think given that the Congress leadership, when they came for that meeting in Jammu, were already well aware of my meeting with Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, and I'd had conversations after my meeting with Mrs. Gandhi with the leadership of the Congress party in Jammu and Kashmir. I think it could have been a little bit more tastefully done, in as much as it could have been conveyed that this was a mutual decision and not as if the Congress was the one that was pulling the plug. That was the only thing that perhaps I could have taken some objection to. But it's a very small matter. This is politics, and one has to be prepared for these things once in a while.
One quick question. Were you informed in advance that Ambika Soni and Gulab Nabi Azad were going to hold a press conference and break the news to the world, or were you taken by surprise?
No, I mean, whenever they've come to the state and had meetings, they've had press conferences. So I wasn't surprised. I also had been informed by my own ministers as well as the Congress ministers in my government that there was to be a press conference after this meeting. So no, I wasn't taken by surprise at all. In fact, I was quite expecting something. Just as I said, I think it would have been better if they had conveyed that this was a mutual decision, which in fact it was. Or perhaps even possibly had representation from the National Conference there as well, so that the decision could have been announced together rather than unilaterally. But honestly, it's no big deal.
Now, you say this was a mutual decision, but the impression given to the outside world is that, in fact, Congress decided to opt out of the alliance because they believed you ran a poor government. That's why they don't want to go to the polls as your allies. How do you escape from that impression?
Look, I mean, if I ran a poor government, they should have left earlier. The fact is that we've run this government together, for better or for worse. I've only been in power for 5.5 years. The Congress has been in power for 11.5 years. And therefore, if there is an element of anti-incumbency that I have to carry, I'll carry that and I'll own up to it. But they can't wish away their own 11.5 years in power, during which they've held crucial portfolios. Even today, in the government that I have, most of the portfolios to do with public dealings, whether it's the roads and bridges, whether it's the public health, whether it's water and irrigation, school education, tourism, urban development, all these portfolios are with the Congress party. So if I ran a poor government, they are partners in that government, and they'll have to stand up and take the responsibility as well. They can't simply pass on the responsibility to me.
In other words, if you're guilty of running a poor government, they're equally guilty of being a part of that government, and some of the most critical ministries which ran possibly poorly were in fact run by them, not by you. You're saying that their share of the blame
I'm just saying that whatever we did together, for better or for worse. We've had some good days, we've taken some good decisions, we've delivered what has to be the most peaceful period that this state has seen. In terms of tourism numbers. The state has never seen such high tourism numbers. The problem is, I don't think we get credit for all the good things that we've done, but the mistakes oftentimes get blown way out of proportion. I don't grudge that. That's part of what this job involves. But no, I think both the Congress and I together, we've done some good things, and we should take credit for those.
Now, given that both parties have decided to split and go their separate ways and contest the election separately, would it not make sense for you to actually call early elections and make a clean cut and break? Most people anyway believe that you're not going to continue and survive till November.
We can't call an election any earlier than this, because unlike parliament elections, where the electoral roll revision has to be completed by the 1st of January of the year of the elections, in Jammu and Kashmir for assembly elections there are 4 dates for electoral roll revisions, and our electoral rolls have to be revised by the 1st of October, and so before that there is no question of election. So there's nothing I can do to bring the elections any earlier. The only thing that would happen is that we'd provoke some sort of a constitutional crisis, and this state would be governed from the center. I don't see why that should be possible, or rather, sorry, I don't see why that should be necessary. I think it is possible for the Congress and the National Conference to govern together. The election model code of conduct will come into being in a couple of months from now, and we'll go and test our strength in front of the people.
You said something very important. It's technicalities to do with when the electoral roll is ready, and the fact that it won't be ready till October that is actually keeping you in harness together till then. Otherwise, I assume you would have called an election and gone to the polls immediately.
Well, I think I mentioned this to you in an interview that I did with you soon after the setback of the parliament elections, where you asked me at that time, why didn't I call a snap election? And I told you then that, I mean, we only have a couple of months before our assembly elections are due, so it wouldn't make any sense to put the state under governor's rule. And the same thing applies now. If I had a year or two before assembly elections were due, then yes, possibly we'd have had an election before time. But elections will take place on their appointed date, and that's largely because, as I said, there is a cutoff for the electoral roll revision that I can't wish away.
2 quick questions. Your great supporter in Congress and someone who insisted that you must be Chief Minister for the full duration of 6 years was Rahul Gandhi. Has this parting of the ways with the Congress affected your relationship with Rahul Gandhi?
I had a relationship with Rahul Gandhi even when the Congress and the PDP were allies. So I see no reason why my relationship with Rahul Gandhi will be affected by the fact that we'll fight elections separately. I sat on opposite ends of the political spectrum, so to speak, during his first term in Parliament and my last term in Parliament. Again, I don't see why there should be any problems. Our relationship is not about the National Conference and the Congress's alliance.
You've also told the Indian Express that your father, Farooq Abdullah, will not be contesting the state elections. Is his political career, or at any rate his electoral career, drawing to a close?
I would think so. His health isn't as we would like it. There is still significant pressure from within the party for him to contest. As a party colleague, I can see where they're coming from, but as a son, I honestly can see how difficult it would be for my father to contest an election, given the concerns that we have regarding the poor health that he keeps every once in a while. So in politics, you never say never, but I'd be extremely surprised if he did contest these forthcoming assembly elections.
I hate to pry into a personal area, and I do this with great reluctance, but when you speak about your father's health not being as good as it has been or should be, no one's aware that he's suffering from ill health. He looked very robust in May when he was contesting the state elections. Has something happened? I don't want to pry, but has something happened that's caused concern?
No, not at all. This has been something that it's been off and on for the last couple of years. he wasn't able to campaign as aggressively as he would have liked. In fact, he only really confined his campaign to just his own seat, the Srinagar Parliament seat. He didn't campaign at all in South Kashmir and probably did only 1 or 2 odd public meetings in North Kashmir. So it's not as if he was a very aggressive campaigner in the last parliamentary elections. It's just something that's been building up.
In other words, it's health related, it's age related and nothing more serious than that.
Yeah, I think that is probably a correct assessment.
Omar Abdullah, thank you very much for joining us. To take further this discussion on Kashmir and what Omar Abdullah has just told us, I'm now joined by the former editor of the Times of India and one of the great experts on Kashmir, Dilip Podgankar, as well as Congress spokesperson Rashmi Kant. Mr. Kant, I want to begin with that question about whether this announcement of the breakup could have been handled more delicately, more discreetly, with greater finesse. You heard Omar Abdullah say it would have been better if in fact he had been told it was going to be done, if in fact it could have been a mutual announcement, and in fact if it could have been said that both parties are actually mutually deciding to part company. Would you agree this could have been better handled?
Well, I think, Mr. Thapar, it was reasonably well handled. We have to keep in mind that when the Congress, the 3 senior Congress leaders went to both the Valley and Kashmir, both the Valley and Jammu, Mr. Soz, Mr. Azad and the General Secretary in charge of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, Ms. Ambika Soni, they went for an assessment for the Congress. They went to the Valley first and then they went to Jammu. And at the end of it, it was a Congress press conference. And at the Congress press conference...
But they are your allies and they've been allies for 5 years.
And as Mr. Omar Abdullah correctly said, that he did definitely know about the fact that there was going to be an announcement that was going to be made.
Okay.
The announcement was made. The words that were used in the press conference were words that were used with great gravitas. There was no acrimony in the words. Okay. There was no personal allegations. There was no allegations made against the government.
I hear you. Let me bring in Dilip Podgankar on that very same point. Dilip Podgankar, did you detect any small element of hurt when you heard Omar Abdullah say that this could have been more discreetly and better handled?
Of course I did. I think there's every reason to feel hurt, because this is not the first time that the Congress, both in Delhi and the local Congress, have made life quite difficult for Omar Abdullah. I think this could have been done gracefully. It was on the cards, and especially after the rout that the NC and the Congress faced in the parliamentary elections, it was obvious to everyone that they would be parting ways. But, you know, I would really in this instance say that the Congress doesn't really have a good record of treating its allies with the respect they merit. In state after state you find this, and therefore the kind of so-called rebellions or revolts that you witness in places like Haryana, Maharashtra, Assam, Bengal, etc. This is really part of the Congress party coming apart at the seams, and therefore the developments in Jammu and Kashmir need to be seen in this broader national context. The other point which I'd like to make, Karan, is that you know, Omar Abdullah has had to, you know, swallow a huge amount of humiliation on a couple of issues. One was everything related to the hanging of Afzal Guru. I believe that could have been handled with far greater tact. He was the one who was asked to carry the can. And secondly, on the entire question of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, there again, things could have been done very differently. On the other hand, I think Omar Abdullah could also have been a little more forthright in giving the panchayats, empowering them, because those elections held under his watch were among the most successful experiments in democracy that we've seen. Now, he didn't do that. So, you know, this is a much larger issue, but let's say I'm not surprised. It's such a pity, though, that the bigger party at the center hasn't really been sensitive to the concerns and interests and sensitivities of its allies.
I want to pick up on one critical part of Dilip Podgankar's answer, and that is that in fact there's a real sense in which you could have done more to help Omar Abdullah and therefore help your ally and your government over the handling of Afzal Guru and over AFSPA, because those are two issues that Omar Abdullah in earlier interviews to me has identified as reasons why he believes the alliance did so badly in May. Stick to those in the answer. Do you think those could have been better handled?
Well, your first question was about Mr. Afzal Guru. And Mr. Thapar, you would certainly agree that on a matter as sensitive in terms of security as the hanging of Mr. Afzal Guru, you could not go about publicly because it could have very serious security repercussions for the state itself and not just for Mr. Afzal Guru. And therefore, I think while there
Did you do enough to explain this in advance to your ally to ensure that his concerns were taken care of or they were ameliorated?
Well, I would say that there are certain things that this was not the hanging of Mr. Afzal Guru was not a question related to a particular state. It was related to the state, to the nation, to the Indian nation, and therefore there was a certain amount of secrecy that was required. And in the future also, if such a situation does arise, any government that is there.
What about AFSPA? After all, there, Mr. Chidambaram himself believed that the case being made by Omar Abdullah was a good one, but the government never acted.
I don't think Mr. Chidambaram ever said that AFSPA should be removed.
I didn't say that either.
No.
He said that the case being made by Omar Abdullah was a good one.
Yeah, the case made by Mr. Omar Abdullah may be a good one, but Mr. Chidambaram was a Home Minister, and based on his inputs from various stakeholders, he took a decision in his wisdom by taking the central government into confidence.
Did he take a decision, or was the decision forced on him by what the security forces and what the army in particular was insisting on, and he was unable to convince them to the contrary?
Well, I must tell you that the army and the security forces are very important stakeholders in keeping non-violence and less violence in Kashmir, and their views cannot be overlooked.
But was this adequately explained to Omar Abdullah?
Well, I am very certain they were adequately explained to Mr. Omar Abdullah, and Mr. Omar Abdullah has been chairing several meetings with the Corps commanders, and he's certainly been kept in the loop always on all security issues concerning the state of Jammu and Kashmir. To say that Mr. Omar Abdullah has not been taken into confidence, I think would be a very gross overstatement and very unfair to the Congress.
Dilip Pradhankar, what about the question I raised with Omar Abdullah that there's a perception that if Congress breaks the alliance before the elections, then clearly what Congress is responding to is that he ran a poor government. And in his answer, he went out of his way to say that Congress was as responsible for the poor image of the government, if there was a poor image, as he was, and that some of the most critical ministries that may have given that impression were actually run by congressmen. Is he right in saying that they share equal, if not disproportionate, blame for the image that this government was not successful?
The Congress stand, Karan, goes against the basic principle of collective responsibility of the government. Now, you begin from that point onwards. Why is it that after the break, you're blaming the NC for all the ills that beset the state? Why is it that you don't also acknowledge that you were in charge, and you were in charge, as Omar Abdullah pointed out, of several departments which have a direct link with development, and development has been lacking in Jammu and Kashmir. So I think, this is a very self-serving kind of an argument that you break an alliance and the next thing you do is to point fingers at your ally. I think this is not very good politics. There's certain baseness to the way you react. So therefore, I think Omar Abdullah is quite right to point out what he did to you.
Very quickly.
But again, as I said, I'm
going to stop you for a moment, Dilip, because Rashmikant wants to respond on behalf of Congress. A quick response.
Yes, Mr. Thapar, you did mention the report in the Indian Express, and you have read reports in various newspapers. Not one single word has been said about the poor performance about Mr. Omar Abdullah. Not one personal allegation against anybody in the government or Mr. Omar Abdullah has been made. All that it has been said is that it is the wish of the Congress workers to go alone, to strengthen the organization. We have made no personal allegation.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
Workers don't want to break with a government and an ally that they think has been successful. You only break with someone when you think has been unsuccessful and performing poorly.
The fact is that not one wrong word has been used against Mr. Omar Abdullah or anybody in the government.
You're absolutely right in saying it. I was simply drawing out the logical inference. But if you insist on your line that nothing has been said, I have to say you're right on that. Dilip Pradhankar, this government of allies is harnessed and yoked together for at least the next 4 months, very much for technical reasons, as Omar Abdullah explained in that interview, because the polls simply won't be ready till October. Can it do anything meaningful between now and the elections in November, whenever they're held?
Well, certainly until the election code comes into effect, there are a few things that they can do, and they can do things on which they are agreed, particularly in areas of development. But you know, politically, Karan, we've come to a situation, Jammu and Kashmir, where the two parties can say, together we fall, but divided we also fall. Because I think both these parties are going to face a fairly big drubbing in the assembly elections.
Absolutely. Now, actually, I want to come to a question. I'm going to put the same question to both of you. I'll start with you, Dilip Uthankar, and then I'll come to Mr. Rashmikant. We have got a sort of confirmation from Omar Abdullah that Farooq Abdullah's political career, or at least very definitely his electoral career, is drawing to a close. His son made it crystal clear that he thinks it's very unlikely that his father will be playing a major role in politics hereafter. How will Kashmir, and maybe India as a whole, because he's also served as a central government minister, look back on the political career of one of the most ebullient politicians we've seen, Farooq Abdullah? First you, Dilip Uthankar.
All I can say is that, you know, the record of Farooq Abdullah, as you know, has been, to put it mildly, quite uneven, but few will doubt that he is an extraordinary, colorful personality, an affable personality. But more than that, I think not one person can point a finger to the patriotism of Farooq Abdullah. If there is one trait of his which stands out, it is the patriotism he's displayed in the face of the heaviest of odds in his state. And I think that is how a lot of people are going to look back on his career.
Very quickly, Rashmikant, how will you as Congress spokesman remember Farooq Abdullah's career?
I would definitely call him a very strong Indian nationalist who has stood by the Indian point of view in Kashmir, both in India and internationally, fought very, very strongly. He remains an Indian nationalist. He has been a colorful personality. He's been a serious personality. He has governed Kashmir well, and we definitely wish him very, very good health. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
All right, gentlemen, on that note, we come to the end of this particular program. If you have been, thanks for watching.
And we'll
goodbye. And you'll miss him. And that's something I can add, every journalist would echo. We will all miss him. There was no more talented interviewee, no more fun a person than Farooq Abdullah. I can remember many good laughs with him, and I too wish him the very best of good health in his retirement. Now, if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.